Home feels safe until it doesn't. It begins with the little things. A knock at the door when no one should be there. The faint scrape of an attic ladder in an empty house. The shuffle in the garage you dismiss as mice. Real danger doesn't always roar or announce itself. It lingers, watching, learning your every move. And when it finally acts, it slips in quietly, through glass doors, down hallways, across dead-end streets, until you realize the most terrifying place to be hunted is inside your own home. The unexpected visitor. Ethan, a 20-year-old college student, was enjoying the freedom of a quiet house while his parents were out of town for a weekend wedding. The house, a classic split level at the end of a dead-end street, was usually a peaceful place, but on a Saturday morning in late August, that peace was shattered. The night before, Ethan had been binging movies in the living room, a large, comfortable space with a huge TV. Since the couch was more comfortable than his own bed, he had just drifted off there, fully intending to get up and move later. It was still dark when Ethan woke up, the morning rain outside casting a somber gray light through the single, uncovered strip of the sliding glass door that led to the back deck. Glancing at the clock, he saw it was already 9:30 a.m. Just as he was settling in to watch some TV, 2 soft knocks echoed from the front door. The sound, light as it was, sent a jolt of anxiety through Ethan. His neighborhood was the kind of place where people only knocked if they were invited, and even then, it was rare. For a moment, he thought it might be the Amazon package he had ordered. The thought was a brief comfort, but when he checked the tracking on his phone, it said the package wouldn't arrive until much later that day. The anxiety returned, a heavy weight in his chest. Whoever was at the door hadn't knocked again. Ethan, hidden by the angle of the living room, cautiously peered toward the front of the house. No one was there. A brief sense of relief washed over him, but it was immediately replaced by a new, more intense fear. From the back of the house, he heard a noise, the distinct sound of footsteps coming up the stairs of the back deck. Ethan froze. The blinds on the sliding glass door blocked most of his view, but through the gap, a man appeared, his face a chilling blank mask. He wore all black, a dark jacket and pants, and his bald head made his expressionless face even more unsettling. His eyes met Ethan's through the glass, and he didn't even flinch. He just stared. Then he tried the door. The handle jiggled, a small, terrifying rattle in the quiet house. It was locked. For a split second, Ethan thought he was safe, but the man didn't move. He just stood there, staring, a silent predator waiting for an opening. Ethan didn't waste any more time. He scrambled off the couch and sprinted down the hallway toward the small first-floor bathroom, slamming and locking the door behind him. The sound of the first loud bang on the sliding glass door was immediate. The man was kicking the glass, trying to shatter it. Adrenaline coursing through his veins, Ethan fumbled for his phone to call 911, only to realize with a sickening lurch that he had left it on the living room couch. As another deafening bang rattled the house, Ethan knew he had to risk it. With the man still focused on the sliding glass door, Ethan cautiously opened the bathroom door, darted out, snatched the phone off the couch and bolted back to the bathroom. As he made his second frantic dash, he saw the man through the glass, his foot mid-kick. Safe again in the locked bathroom, Ethan called 911, his voice shaking as he tried to explain what was happening. As the operator was telling him to calm down, a final splintering crash echoed through the house. The man was inside. Ethan heard his footsteps moving slowly, deliberately, through the living room. The footsteps stopped just outside the bathroom door. He tried the handle, then started pounding on the door. "In with you. Just stay on the line," the operator's calm voice said. But just as the words registered, Ethan's phone screen went black. The battery had died. A wave of sheer terror washed over him. He was alone. The pounding on the door stopped. Ethan heard the man's footsteps retreat, heading down the stairs to the basement. A terrifying moment of silence passed. Then he heard him return, the sound of his footsteps now accompanied by a heavy, dragging sound. The next bang on the door was different. It was heavier, more powerful, as if he had found a tool, maybe a baseball bat. Panicked, Ethan shoved himself into the small linen closet inside the bathroom, barely fitting, pulling the door shut. The loud thuds against the door continued, each one sounding like it could be the last. Then, another sound cut through the chaos. A loud, urgent knock at the front door. A shout followed. "Police!" The thuds stopped. Ethan heard the man's footsteps retreat again, this time toward the back of the house where he had broken in. A short while later, he heard shouting, and then an officer's voice yelled, "Put it down!" After a moment of silence, multiple voices called out, "Police! Come out! The house is clear!" Ethan, shaking, slowly crept out of the linen closet and out of the bathroom. The police had arrived just in time, catching the man as he tried to escape out the back. Ethan was physically unharmed, but the feeling of utter vulnerability, of being trapped in his own home, has never really gone away. He is still a little shaken up, and his parents have installed a new security system, but the experience is a stark reminder of how quickly a normal day can turn into a nightmare. The man in the attic. When you're 10 years old, a few hours feels like a lifetime. For Mark, who was that age about 15 years ago, a few hours was all it took for his world to turn upside down. It was a Friday afternoon, and his parents and older brother were going out to run some errands. They invited him along, but Mark, obsessed with a new video game, politely declined, figuring they would be gone for a couple of hours at most. He went straight upstairs to his room, a small space on the second floor. As he sat down and booted up his game console, he heard a sound from the hallway, a soft scraping noise. It was strange. No one else was supposed to be home. He froze, listening. The sound came again, this time more distinct and closer to his bedroom door. His door was ajar, open just enough for him to peek out. With a surge of curiosity and a growing sense of unease, Mark slowly leaned his head into the doorway. That's when he saw him. A man, his back to Mark, slowly climbing down the wooden ladder that led to the attic. Mark's blood ran cold. He quickly pulled his head back into the room, hoping the man hadn't seen or heard him. For a moment, his mind struggled to process what he had just witnessed. Was a repairman here? No, his parents hadn't mentioned anything. He heard the man's footsteps as he descended the last few rungs of the ladder and began to walk down the hallway, directly toward his room. Driven by a primal fear, Mark scrambled to the floor and slid headfirst under his bed, pulling his legs up as far as he could. He could hear the man's footsteps pass his open doorway and continue down the main staircase. Lying there, with his ear pressed to the floor, he could hear the faint sounds of someone moving around downstairs. The house, which had moments before felt so familiar and safe, was now a trap. He lay there, motionless, for what felt like an eternity. He didn't have a cell phone, and the house phone was downstairs, an impossible distance away. His only hope was to stay hidden and silent. After a long, tense period, he heard the footsteps again, this time coming back up the stairs. He held his breath as the footsteps passed his room, and then faded into silence. The man, it seemed, had returned to the attic. Mark didn't dare move. He stayed under the bed until he heard the front door unlock and the familiar voices of his parents and brother. With a sob of relief, he scrambled out from his hiding spot and ran downstairs, frantically trying to explain what had happened. His father initially dismissed the story as a child's overactive imagination, even joking about it. But Mark was insistent. Something in his terrified expression must have convinced his dad to at least check. When his father went upstairs and pulled down the attic ladder, he immediately saw signs that someone had been up there recently. A blanket was folded on the floor and a few items had been moved. The man wasn't there, but the evidence of his presence was undeniable. They called the police, and after a short search, officers found the man hiding in a nearby shed. He had been living in their attic for several days, an unsettling thought that still gives Mark shivers to this day. The man was a drifter who had slipped into their house through an unlocked door during the day when no one was home. He had been coming and going, completely unnoticed, until a bored 10-year-old and a moment of bad timing exposed him. Mark considers himself incredibly lucky. He never knows why the man went back up to the attic instead of searching the house, or why he never heard the noise from his video games. He's just grateful he was in the right place at the right time to get away. It's a memory that serves as a permanent, chilling reminder to always check your locks. The garage. Living alone has its perks, and for Jordan, his small one-bedroom house was the perfect size. It was a comfortable, cozy space, and he had been settled in for about a year. But a memory from his first few months in the house still creeps up on him sometimes, a reminder of just how vulnerable living alone can be. It was a regular weeknight, around 10:30 p.m., and Jordan was sprawled out on the couch, lost in a movie. The house was silent except for the television. Then, a faint sound from the other end of the house broke the quiet. It was a soft scuffling noise, almost like a whisper. Jordan's first thought was that it was mice, the kind of mundane annoyance you deal with as a homeowner. He turned the TV volume down, straining to listen. The sound came again. It was subtle, but now that he was listening for it, it was undeniably there. It seemed to be coming from the kitchen area, specifically near the pantry and the attached garage. Jordan, still thinking it was a small animal, got up to investigate. As he got closer to the garage door, the sound became clearer. It wasn't a scuffling, it was a rhythmic shuffling noise, like someone was walking. A knot of fear tightened in Jordan's stomach. The rational part of his brain tried to dismiss it, to say it was just his imagination, but the sound was too real. He reached for the handle to the garage and slowly, cautiously, opened the door. The one-car garage was pitch black. Jordan fumbled for the light switch. The single bulb that flickered on cast a weak, yellow glow, but it was enough to see that the garage was empty. No one was there. He looked behind the car, under the work table, and in the small corners of the space. Nothing. The silence was unnerving. Jordan stood there for a long moment, the fear growing with every second he was exposed. He finally backed away, closing and locking the door behind him. He went back to the couch and sat in silence, just listening. He half expected to hear the footsteps again, to hear a new sound from inside the garage, but the house was quiet. The silence was more unsettling than the noise had been. Jordan convinced himself that whoever had been out there, a strange, chilling thought to have, must have been scared off when he opened the door. Eventually, he relaxed enough to finish watching TV and finally went to bed. The next morning, the night's events were a distant memory. Jordan woke up and went to the kitchen, ready to make coffee, but he stopped dead in his tracks. The front door was wide open. His eyes went to the garage door, and sure enough, it was ajar, the lock disengaged. A wave of ice-cold dread washed over him. He distinctly remembered closing and locking both doors the night before. Someone had been in the garage, and then they had been inside the house. Jordan did a quick panic sweep of the house. Nothing seemed out of place. Nothing was stolen. It seemed the person had just walked through, a ghost with malicious intent. He had no idea who it was or how they had gotten in, but they were gone now. Jordan immediately called the police to file a report, and he had his locks changed the same day. To this day, he can't shake the terrifying thought he was home, alone, and completely unaware that someone else was walking around his house. The sounds from the garage weren't just a random person outside, it was a prelude to an invasion. The true horror wasn't the noise in the garage, but the chilling realization that he had been inches away from a dangerous individual without ever knowing it. The man on the side of the road. This happened to Chloe during her freshman year of college, a time when she was still getting used to living alone in her off-campus apartment. The apartment was on the second floor of a small, old building, and she had a habit of keeping her window open to let in the breeze during the warm, late summer nights. It was a Tuesday, late, probably around 1 a.m., and she was sitting on the floor of her living room, scrolling through her phone. Her apartment faced a quiet, two-lane road. From her window, she could see a stretch of the sidewalk and the streetlights that cast long, distorted shadows. That's when she saw him. A man was standing perfectly still on the side of the road, just outside the pool of light from the nearest streetlight. He was a few hundred feet down the street from her building, almost hidden in the darkness. Chloe tried to ignore him at first. Maybe he was just waiting for a ride, or maybe his car had broken down. But as she kept glancing up from her phone, she noticed something that made her heart skip a beat. He wasn't moving. He was just standing there, completely still, facing her building. A creeping feeling of unease began to settle in. She told herself it was probably nothing. Maybe he was talking on the phone or just having a private moment. But after 10 minutes, he was still there. And then he took a step. A slow, deliberate step toward her building. Chloe's breath hitched. She watched, her phone forgotten in her lap, as he took another step, and then another. He was walking directly toward her apartment building, his pace slow and methodical. Panic began to set in. She slowly got up from the floor, making sure to stay out of sight of the window. She crept over to the glass, peeking through the narrow gap between the curtains. She could see him now, much closer. He was a tall man, wearing a long, dark coat even though it was a warm night. She could feel her entire body shaking. He stopped directly in front of her building, right below her window. Chloe held her breath, her mind racing. What was he doing? Was he looking up? She couldn't tell. He just stood there for what felt like an eternity, his stillness more terrifying than any sudden movement. Then, he did something that made a cold wave of terror wash over her. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled something out. In the faint light of the street lamp, she couldn't make out what it was, but he held it up to his ear, as if it were a phone. He began to talk, his voice a low, indiscernible mumble. He was still staring directly at her window. Chloe felt a primal fear that she had never experienced before. He wasn't just standing there. He was talking to someone, and he was looking right at her apartment. A sudden, horrifying thought crossed her mind. What if he was on the phone with someone who was already inside her building? She hadn't heard any doors, but what if they were already on the second floor outside her door? She grabbed a heavy book from her shelf, her hands trembling, and backed away from the window. She crept to her bedroom, which had an older, heavy door that locked from the inside. She slid the deadbolt shut, the click of the lock a small, pathetic sound against the silence of the apartment. She then moved a small dresser in front of the door, as if that would do anything against a determined intruder. For the next hour, she sat in her bedroom, listening, her heart pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it from outside. She listened for footsteps in the hallway, for the sound of her doorknob rattling, for any indication that she was no longer alone. But the only sounds were the quiet hum of her refrigerator and the frantic beating of her own heart. She periodically peeked out the bedroom window, which faced the side of the building, but saw nothing. Around 2 a.m., she finally dared to go back to the living room window. She crept to the curtains and slowly, cautiously, looked out. The man was gone. The street was empty, the only movement the leaves rustling in the breeze. Chloe never saw him again, and nothing ever happened. But to this day, she can't shake the feeling of being watched. She had her locks changed the next day and bought a peephole camera for her door. But the memory of that man standing silently in the dark and staring directly at her window remains a constant chilling reminder that you never truly know who is watching you. The hidden key. Ben was 18 and home alone for the weekend. His parents were out of town visiting his grandmother, and he had the house all to himself. It was a Saturday night, and he was settled on the couch watching a movie. Around 11 p.m., he heard a faint click coming from the front door. He froze. He knew he hadn't locked the front door. He was in the habit of leaving it unlocked when he was just inside, since his parents were always so vigilant about locking up. But he was sure he had closed it. The click he heard sounded like a door being slowly, cautiously pushed open. He muted the TV, his heart beginning to pound in his chest. He heard another sound, a soft shuffle of footsteps on the hardwood floor just inside the doorway. Ben slid off the couch and crouched behind it, his eyes fixed on the entrance to the living room. He listened intently, every muscle in his body tense. The footsteps stopped. The silence that followed was suffocating. Ben's mind was racing. Was it his parents coming home early? No. They had told him they wouldn't be back until Sunday evening. Was it a friend playing a prank? He tried to convince himself that was it. but the quiet, deliberate way the person had moved felt wrong. He heard the footsteps again, this time moving toward the kitchen. He could hear the sound of a cupboard being opened, then closed. Was someone just looking for food? A burglar? He grabbed his phone and quickly, silently, typed out a text to his friend Dave. "I think someone is in my house. Don't call, just text me back." Dave's response came a moment later. "Dude, are you serious?" Ben didn't respond. He crept from behind the couch, staying low, and moved toward the kitchen entrance. He peeked around the corner, his eyes scanning the dark kitchen. The fridge light wasn't on, and the room was empty. But then he saw it. The pantry door, which was always kept closed, was slightly ajar. A cold fear gripped him. He knew someone was in the house, but they were no longer in the kitchen. He backed away slowly, his phone clutched in his hand, and crept toward the back of the house, where his bedroom was. As he walked, he heard a new noise from upstairs, a faint creak, as if someone was walking on the floor above him. He had no idea what was happening. He got to his bedroom and slowly, silently, locked the door. He then texted his parents, asking them what the spare key location was. He knew they had one hidden outside, but he couldn't remember where. His mom responded almost immediately, "In the fake rock next to the porch." This information, meant to be a comfort, instead sent a shiver of dread down his spine. The key was a little-known family secret. Only a handful of people knew about it. He looked at the unlocked phone in his hand and his breath hitched. He had forgotten to change his password a few days ago, and a friend had recently seen him type it in. He texted his parents again, his fingers shaking as he typed, "Who knows about the fake rock key?" "Just family and a few of our friends," his mom replied. "Why?" Ben didn't respond. The silence was unnerving. He could hear nothing from upstairs, nothing from the living room. He was trapped. He sat on his bed, every shadow in the room looking like a lurking figure. He spent the next hour with his back to the wall, his phone in his hand, ready to dial 911 at a moment's notice. Eventually, the silence was broken by the sound of a car pulling into the driveway. It was Dave. Ben rushed to the front door, his hands trembling as he unlocked it and let Dave in. He explained what had happened, and Dave, armed with a baseball bat from his car, helped him search the house. They found nothing. No one was there. The pantry door was open, and the spare key was still in its rock outside. But the fear lingered. The police never found anyone. The family had a security system installed the next week, but Ben still can't shake the feeling that he was watched. He still doesn't know who was in his house or what they wanted, but he knows that for one terrifying night, someone was inside his home, and they knew exactly where the spare key was hidden.